Now a senior vice president and academic dean at the Milwaukee Public Museum, she was once known as the Lizard Lady. Dr. Ellen Censky is my special guest next on I Remember. Hi, I'm Jim Peck. Welcome to I Remember. Joining me tonight is Dr. Ellen Censky. Her fieldwork as a herpetologist took her to Central and South America and the Caribbean, and after extensive work at other museums, in 2008, she joined the Milwaukee Public Museum as Senior Vice President and Academic Dean. This natural history museum has some fantastic collections and a history that dates back to the 19th century. Take a look.
The Milwaukee Public Museum moved to its current downtown location at 8th and Wells in the mid-1960s. What began in 1882 as a small natural history collection grew to become one of the nation's largest museums. Visitors today can get a glimpse of the city from earlier times as they walk through the streets of Old Milwaukee, with shops and businesses from the 1880s to the early 1900s. The Heber Mammoth displays an important archaeological discovery in the 1990s. A tribute to American Indians features a modern powwow grand entry scene. Generations of kids have been awed by the bison hunt on horseback, where many stop to look for the secret button that activates the rattlesnake. The museum is home to more than 4.5 million objects and specimens used for research, exhibits, and educational programs. You can explore life on Earth and take a trip through time. Experience the sights and sounds of Africa, from an elephant in a bamboo forest to a water hole on the savannah. Get a closer look at a Guatemalan market, or travel to another continent and learn about the countries in Asia. You can even wander among free-flying butterflies in a tropical garden. A special traveling exhibition, Real Pirates, is at the museum through late May of 2013. The green roof now atop the museum was a project headed by Dr. Ellen Censky. Formerly a director at museums in Oklahoma and Connecticut, she also did extensive fieldwork during her many years at the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh. She once documented how a hurricane moved a population of iguanas 200 miles from one Caribbean island to another. And when a force of nature suddenly stripped an island's black rocks of their color, her research showed how the environmental change adversely affected the survival rate of the darker lizards.
When you signed up to do fieldwork, did you have any idea you were going to end up in a jungle looking at a jaguar?
Well, I never expected to actually encounter a jaguar, but I actually did know that I was going to be out in a jungle when I signed up to do fieldwork, because that's why I wanted to do fieldwork. So, you want to hear about the story of the jaguar? I would love to,
because the jaguar is one of the most dangerous animals in the world.
Yeah. Well, I was down in Paraguay doing a biological inventory with some Paraguayan counterparts. And we were up in the Chaco, which is the northern part of the country, very dry part of the country. And we were out at night walking along some of the abandoned roads up in the Chaco, looking for lizards and snakes and whatever we could find, frogs. And we'd been out for probably a couple hours, maybe 2-3 hours, searching. And finally my headlight, which we all wore headlights to find stuff. So my headlight started to get dim, and I said to Lucy, who was my Paraguayan friend, you know, let's just turn around because it's getting late and my headlight's going dark, so I'm not going to be able to see anything. We turned around and we immediately saw eye shine on the road that had been behind us. Now it was in front of us.
Not a good idea.
No, well, and it was eye shine. You see it all over in the jungle, but it was eye shine that was high.
Yeah.
It was higher up, and so we both thought, oh, what's that? And then Lucy, who had a brighter light, she, all of a sudden the animal passed and we could see it was a jaguar. So she, the thing walked across the road and then came and settled down on the side of the road right where we had to pass. So
sort of like reading a menu.
Yes, and so she was, she had her headlight on it, and hers was still pretty bright, and all the while she had her headlight on it, it didn't do anything. But she took her headlight off just to see what was around us. So if we had to run, which wouldn't have
No.
done any good,
No.
but if we had to, we'd know where we were headed. And as soon as she did that, she put it back on, and it looked like it was getting ready to pounce. You know, it just looked like it was tensing its muscles.
No.
And so she had a shotgun, and she just shot it off into the air, and we made all kinds of noise, and the thing took off. And all the way back to camp, she just kept on reloading and firing the gun, and we were making tons of noise. And yeah, it was one of those. I'm just glad I didn't have a full bladder at that point.
They don't tell you about that in grad school, do they?
No, they don't. They don't.
Didn't somebody tell me that you also had a close encounter with drug runners or gun runners?
Yeah, drug runners down in Anguilla. I was doing research on a deserted island, and it was the island I had to be on for the specific project I was doing, but it was also a drug runner island. And so I had my camp set up. I was alone on the island. I had my camp set up just off behind the dune so that I was pretty much hidden, but every evening I'd go down to the water to bathe and just cool off. And one time I was coming out over the dune, and it wasn't like a sand dune with no trees. It had a lot of dense vegetation right on the dune. As just before I was going to step out onto the beach from the dune, I noticed this cigarette boat come zipping into the bay, and this is dusk. And then a sailboat followed it in, and then they moved over to a bay around the bend from where I was, and I could see them there because of the mast of the sailboat. And I was thinking, well, maybe they're just going in for the night, because though that never happens on that island because it just doesn't have protected bays, I just thought maybe they don't know the area and they're just settling down for the night. But then all of a sudden, about right after dark, the cigarette boat just went zipping out off across the bay, and the sailboat followed. And the next day, the Coast Guard was out searching, and the U.S. Coast Guard searches down there for drug runners because they'd gotten a report that there had been a drug drop. And in fact, on that island, that was an island where they did drop, because it had this nice flat cleared area, and they'd land planes on it, and then the boats would come in and drop off, and then the planes would take off and come up to the U.S.
And you thought it'd be a good idea to be on this island by yourself?
Well, it was the only island that had this specific lizard that I was studying, and so I needed to be there.
You mentioned a herpetologist, and I wonder if everybody knows what a herpetologist is, because it ain't what it sounds like.
No, it isn't what it sounds like. It is someone who studies amphibians and reptiles. So snakes, lizards.
I can imagine trying to rent an apartment and telling some of your herpetologists, well, I don't want you around here.
Yeah, in fact, that happened.
Really?
in Pittsburgh. Somebody was a little dubious when I was renting the apartment. So
Herp what?
yes, yeah. Are you sure? Are you? Should we quarantine you?
You must speak a lot of languages.
You know, you would think I would. I speak a little bit of Spanish, and I learned when I was in Paraguay. I learned enough words of Guarani, which is the native language down there, because once you get outside of the big cities, Asuncion, everybody speaks Guarani. So I learned enough Guarani to actually learn to say hi, to say, I want turtles, I want snakes, show me where they are.
Show me your snakes.
Yep, and I actually got into a little bit of trouble. My Paraguayan counterpart, Lucy Aquino, she and I were driving out to a park, and she was teaching me Guarani on the way. And this park had a military installation. It was a national park, but there was a military installation right next to it. And we had to go and check in at the military installation before we could go into the park. And so when I got out of the car, I stood up and I said, "Mbore" to everybody.
Which means hello.
Which I thought meant hello.
Oops. And
it was a whole bunch of guys sitting around, and they all just looked shocked. And I thought, well, I'm over 6 feet tall. I'm 6'1", and in Paraguay they're short. So I thought, well, maybe it's just my height. But then I heard Lucy laughing in the background, and I'd actually had not said hello. I had called them something that I can't say on TV.
But it starts with an A.
Yes.
And it's 2 words.
And it's 2 words, yes. And I thought...
I suddenly get this vision of this gigantic Caucasian getting out of the thing and saying,
yes,
"Ale!"
Yes, yep. And they soon started laughing. Actually, it turned out to be great because then they became our best friends, and they helped us. If they ever saw a snake or something, they'd come and get us. They wouldn't actually collect it because they didn't want to, but they'd come and get us, and
They
they'd
teach
tell
you
us
any more Guarani?
I chose not to learn any more from Lucy.
With the museum, and museum, as we were talking about before we went on the air, it's one of my favorite things in town. But I don't know a lot about how museums work. Do they have specialties, for example?
Well, there are museums with specialties, and our museum is both a natural and cultural history museum. So what we focus in on is the natural history, the biologies, the geology, and then we also have the cultural side, which is the anthropology history. So we are a little bit broader in what we cover in this museum than most natural history museums, even though we call ourselves a natural history museum. We do, in fact, I have to, even though I work there, I still want to brag about the museum, and it's not just because I work there. I've worked in a lot of museums, and it is one of the gems in the U.S.
Is it really?
It is, and especially those exhibits. You may go in there and say, oh yeah, it never changes, but in fact, there are so many special things about that museum that we wouldn't want to change, because the museum, Milwaukee Public Museum, has been producing exhibits that are these immersive style exhibits where you feel like you're right inside the rainforest.
The western or the rainforest,
or the Africa. You go up to the 3rd floor and you're in Africa. And they're very immersive style, and that actually in the museum world, that kind of exhibit has a name, and it's called the Milwaukee style of exhibits.
Well, that's kind of nice to know.
It is. We were the first to start doing that. Dioramas were first done here. Carl Akeley was here. He did the first diorama, which is on display in the museum right now.
Which one is that?
It's the muskrat. It's a small exhibit on the 1st floor.
By the way, did they still have the thing, the Western thing? I see a buffalo and I see a rattlesnake, and there's a button that you can hit and scare the cookies out of the kids.
And the button's working still.
It is.
Yes, it is.
And it makes the rattlesnake work.
It makes the rattlesnake work.
Scares the cookies out of the kitties.
Yep. But and we sell little onesies that say, I know where the rattlesnake button is.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Is a museum for entertainment, or is it for research?
It is both. It is. It's an education. We call it edutainment because it is while we're entertaining, we're educating you at the same time. So we don't do anything that doesn't have. We don't do anything within the museum mission that doesn't have an educational purpose. You may not know that we're educating you because you're so entertained. Yeah, but so we are educational. We are also a research institution, and the reason why we have that research is because that helps us to produce exhibits that are accurate. It helps us to produce the programming that is accurate. And I would say up to date, if we could, our exhibits may not be up to date, but our knowledge is up to date, and when we produce an exhibit, it will have the most current information in it. Unfortunately, it takes a long time to actually do those kind of immersive exhibits.
One of the things that fascinated me when I started thinking about doing this show and talking to you was, for example, right now as we tape this show, we have the pirates, the real pirates exhibit. And I thought, well, that's nice, but I thought, how do you get something like that? How do you figure out, number one, what you want, and number two, what's available?
Well, it's kind of a putting together a puzzle, because we know when our best times to have these kinds of traveling exhibits are, which is in the spring, because that's when we get our largest audience, and so we want to bring them in when we're going to have our biggest audience.
But is it a chicken and egg? In other words, you get your best audiences because that's when you have your exhibits?
I don't think so, because I think the fall is when kids are going back to school, people are just coming off of vacation. And in the summer we have it's Wisconsin. Who doesn't want to be outside
exactly.
in Wisconsin? So
You
we have great.
You need a deer hunting exhibit.
That's well, and we have great days in the summer, especially when it's hot and people don't want to be out. But you know, when it's nice, people want to be down at Summerfest or out on the lake, or so we want to make sure that we're hitting our best time, but we also need to have an exhibit that's available at that time.
You mentioned the Pirates as a traveling exhibit, so that comes in sort of lock, stock, and barrel, and then you put it up.
Right.
What made you choose Pirates?
We thought that it would be a fun exhibit, an exhibit for the whole family, and an exhibit that addressed a topic that we don't address in our museum and that we haven't addressed in our other traveling exhibits. We've done a lot of the more cultural, from the Cleopatra and mummies, and so we wanted to go with something that, and Cleopatra and mummies were wonderful exhibits. They had more adult content. This one has both an adult and a kids content.
Talk about it for a while. There was a ship, is it the Wida? And tell me about what that was.
The Wida was a slave ship. It was commissioned, it was built and commissioned as a slave ship. It made its maiden voyage in 1716 from the west coast of Africa, from a little village of Wida is where the slaves came. Carried 360 slaves across the ocean, arrived with about 302, I think, so obviously they lost some. But dropped off the slaves in the Caribbean and turned around to go back to Africa, and was captured by Sam Bellamy, who was a pirate.
Really?
Yeah, and the pirates actually looked for slave ships because those were the fastest ships, because they were carrying humans, and so they moved
and
fast.
that was illegal. I don't know whether it was illegal right then, but it was illegal in some places.
For, you mean piracy?
Yeah,
or?
well, piracy was always illegal, but unless you were with the government.
That's right, privateering it wasn't, but it was still legal.
Pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. It was, but slavery was a big time for slavery, and it was legal. But so the Sam Bellamy captured the pirate ship and made it his own ship, and then he went on to capture 50 more ships and all the booty on those ships, and then he this all in a very short period of time. He then
he was a very successful pirate.
He was very successful. He then decided to go up to Massachusetts to visit his girlfriend, and ran into a storm off the coast of Cape Cod, a big nor'easter, and he and two other ships, they went down, and everybody but two people were lost. They captured the two people and put them on trial and hanged one for being a pirate, and apparently the other one said, you know, I didn't want to be a pirate, I was coerced into doing this, and so they let him go. But then the story is that he was captured like a year later on another pirate ship.
This time they hanged him.
This time they hanged him.
Yeah, they used to treat pirates rather. What kind of a man was Bellamy? Do we know anything about him?
Well, he started out as a sailor, and he and his uncle went down to do salvage work off of a ship, trying to get money when they were down in Florida. The ship was already salvaged, and so they became pirates. And he was a very successful pirate. He also was from what the exhibit says, and this is what I understand about piracy, because I am by no means a pirate expert.
Oh, you're a lizard person.
That's right, and I don't think they had any snakes on the ships, but they had a really a democratic system of governance on the ships, and so they would elect the captain, and obviously he was doing a good job because he was kept on being elected, and then they divvied up the booty in a very even manner. They had workman's comp. If you lost a leg, you got paid for that leg.
Seriously? They were pretty far-reaching people.
That's right. They had their article of the contract that everybody had to sign, and that laid out the rules for how
It's
they
not
were
what
governed.
I've heard about pirates. I hear about pirates bloodthirsty and make you walk the plank and things like that.
And that doesn't mean they weren't that way with when they captured a ship. If you fought, then they did you in. If they captured you and you fought, they did you in. If you didn't fight, you were treated more fairly. And often, like the captain of the Witta, the first captain, he was known to be a very fair captain. And so when Sam Belmy captured that ship, they put him onto one of their other ships and gave it to him, and he sailed off. So it depended on how you acted with them.
And what do you want people to come away with when they see this exhibit, or any exhibit?
I think, it tells the whole story of not only piracy, it tells about slavery too. The beginning part of the exhibit is about slavery. But I think it's just to come away with an idea of what it was like to be a pirate. What was piracy? Who were pirates? I mean, pirates were a very diverse group of people. They were of many nationalities, and many of them were African Americans,
really?
Either freed or escaped slaves. So I think it's just to give you a real sense of what was piracy. A little bit different than the Johnny Depp and Pirates of the Caribbean. So it's to just put a new face on pirates.
And we'll see the boat, the ship.
The ship
we'll
is
see
actually
booty.
You will. You don't actually see the Witta, but you see a recreation of the Witta, and it's done at scale. It's done at scale for width. It's not the entire length of the boat, but you get to go on it and you get to see just how big that boat was. And so I would say anybody who goes, when you go below deck and you look at that, just imagine 360 people in there. It's just unfathomable. And then what you do see is once you come out of that boat, you enter into a couple of rooms where all of the actual booty in terms of coinage is found. And there's one huge treasure chest that's filled with pieces of 8. And those are all real.
Really?
Yes, and they were all counted when they were put in, and when they're taken out, they will again be counted, and with somebody watching over the counting. So it is, I don't know how many pieces it is, but it is, it's phenomenal. And you can actually, there's one part of the display where there are a few of the coins where you can touch, so you can actually touch real pirate booty. And the reason we know it's...
You can't be a pirate. You can't take it with you.
No, but if you wear a pirate costume, we'll give you a discount, so you can go through the exhibit as a pirate, yes.
Are there some exhibits that are either out there or that are in your mind that you would like to see in Milwaukee?
We are always on the look for big exhibits, and we're always getting ideas from the public on what they want to see, and we're always looking at them. It's interesting. The one thing is we get a lot of ideas, and people, they don't see it, and then they say, oh, they're not listening to us. But the reality is that we have to, it's a real, the exhibits are not always available. They're not, sometimes they've been in Chicago, and if they've been in Chicago recently, we really don't want them here because it's too, so it's really, we're constantly juggling to see if we can get these exhibits in. Now, we of course will always do exhibits that relate to our mission. So we're not going to do an exhibit that is on something that is like monster trucks, because that doesn't relate to our mission. But
you did one a couple of years ago, I think it was a couple of years ago, on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that was I think your first project, wasn't it?
That was when I
And that must have been, it was a wonderful nightmare, but it must have been a nightmare.
It was, because that one was unlike these other traveling exhibits, because that one didn't travel. That was one we put together, but it was temporary. So it took us, I came on in 2008, and it was plunked on my desk as a project, and we opened it in 2010. And it took, for one full year, it took the whole exhibit staff. It took all of them in to create this. It took our curator of ancient history, a year and a half of doing research.
I mean, how do you get somebody to give you a priceless document, a fragment that was written thousands of years ago?
It takes a lot of negotiation and a lot of back and forth, and we were very concerned that we may not even get them, especially when there had been a Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit in Canada that opened shortly before our exhibit, and the Canadian government, there were protests going on because the Palestinians actually had the Dead Sea Scrolls first in their museum, and then when Israel took over, they took over the museum, and Israel was lending the Dead Sea Scrolls to Canada, and so the Palestinians were asking them to return them. And so it was a big deal, and we were concerned that that might impact our exhibit. Now, we were not getting any scrolls from Israel. We were getting scrolls from Jordan, from France, and from, where else did we get them? We got one right here in the U.S. from the New Jersey. There's a church, a church
that
in
had Jersey.
That had a scroll, and
Wow.
we were able to get it. So we got those, but then we also got Bibles from all over, and it's negotiation, and it's a lot of contracts, and it's couriers that are
And a lot of
hand-carrying
insurance,
these.
I would think. Dr. Ellen
lot of
Censky,
insurance.
this has gone by quickly. I love the museum. Go and see the pirates and whatever is there when you happen to see this show. This is the place to do it. Thanks very much for being with us. Thank you. Hope we'll see you next time as we continue to remember. Thanks.